this a holdup?
It's a science experiment!
Trains were just too exciting to pass up for most bandits. Robbing trains was an exciting and rewarding activity for criminals in the past.
What you aiming to do, partner?
I ain't aiming to do nothing. I'm doing it. I'm holding up this train.
In 1924, the Newton brothers, Willis, Doc, Jess, and Joe, committed possibly the largest train robbery in U.S. history. The brothers were known to have robbed more than 80 banks and 6 trains during their criminal careers. They, along with a postal inspector, created the perfect train heist. 2 of the brothers boarded the mail train and pulled guns on the engineer. They forced the trains to stop at Rondout, Illinois. The rest and some accomplices were waiting at Rondout with a fleet of cars. The brothers used tear gas bombs to stun the passengers and then attacked the mail clerks on the train. The Newtons stole more than $3 million in cash and bonds. The group escaped, but Doc was accidentally shot in the confusion. Now here's the strange thing. The Newtons were later apprehended at the hospital. Why? Because Doc was receiving medical attention.
You have got to be kidding.
Most of the gang was arrested in a matter of days, except for Jess Newton. He headed to Texas and came up with a brilliant idea to bury his share of the money, but later he realized he had become so drunk when he went and buried it, he had no idea where he put it. It was never found, even though the brothers all looked for it after serving their time. Hey, I wonder where I put that shovel. In 1923, the DeArrate Twins, Roy and Ray, along with their younger brother Hugh, ambushed a Southern Pacific train in Oregon as it was emerging from a dark tunnel. The brothers didn't plan or execute their whole robbery very well because they tried to blow up the mail cart. However, the brothers used way too much dynamite. They ended up destroying the mail cart and killed the mail clerk. The brothers also shot and killed the conductor, fireman, and engineer during the raid. They were under the impression that the cart was carrying $40,000 in gold, but they were shocked to find out there wasn't anything aboard. The brothers left the scene quickly and went unnoticed for 3 years before being caught. The DeArrate brothers were convicted of their crimes and each served a life sentence in prison, and not a penny to show for their effort. Canada's first successful train robbery was in 1904 by Bill Miner. He and 2 other men boarded a Canadian Pacific Railroad train at his station under the cover of thick, dense fog. They held up the engineer and fireman at gunpoint and forced them to stop the train and release all the cars. Miner and his men stole $6,000 in gold, $1,000 in cash, $50,000 in U.S. bonds, and $250,000 in Australian securities. Now, Miner and his men escaped, but later they robbed another Canadian Pacific Railroad, only to make off with $15. Miner and his men were identified and located at a nearby campsite. Later, the 3 men were arrested and sent to prison, but get this one. Miner would later tunnel his way out of prison and was never seen or heard from again in Canada.
Later, dude.
The notorious Cook gang, led by Bill Cook along with his brother Jim and some outlaws, were more known for robbing banks and stagecoaches. The gang got a tip that the Frisco train was coming into Red Fork, which is south of Tulsa, and it was carrying the pay for the cattle shipment from the Spike S Ranch south of town. They arrived in town an hour or so before the train and took over the train depot. One of the outlaws discovered a gallon of whiskey there and decided to share it with his fellow gang members. When the train rolled in, 2 men took control of the engine and the rest guarded the express car. The express manager was scared to death. He dropped his receipt book and thrust his hands in the air. He denied that there was any money on the train at all. The robbers then decided to take a look for themselves, not trusting this guy. They found 2 more gallons of whiskey. The whiskey had gotten the better of the gang so much that they became sort of friendly. They marched up and down the cars, forcing passengers to take a few drinks. Well, when the whiskey ran low, the outlaw band decided they better get out of there. As the gang rode away, this messenger sported a grin on his face. He looked inside the receipt book, and right there was the cattle payment, all in crisp currency, ready to be paid. Well, no good deed ever goes unpunished, that is for sure. One night, a band of hooligans robbed a train at Canyon Diablo Station about 50 miles east of Flagstaff. Fresh snow marked their trail as they made their way north across the Navajo reservation towards Lee's Ferry. A sheriff named O'Neill kept up pursuit. The bandits made good time and crossed into Utah, and the posse just followed. The bandits got tired and slowed down, and after a brief gun battle, tried to escape on foot. They were all captured and brought to Arizona on a train. Well, J.J. Smith hopped off the train going through a window and took off. He made it all the way to Texas by making good use of stolen horses. Well, here's where the good deed comes in. Along the way, he came across a woman who was wandering the prairie. She was lost, confused, hadn't eaten in a few days. He really felt bad. He stopped and helped her. In doing so, he got the attention of the authorities, who promptly arrested him and sent him on to Arizona.
It was my great-great-uncle Joshua Laramie who was shot in Indiana while attempting to rob a train.
Well, in 1912, two men decided to rob the number 9 Galveston Harrisburg and San Antonio locomotive. One was a newcomer to train robbery. His name was Ole Hobeck. The other was a former Wild Bunch member and Butch Cassidy associate. His name was Ben Kilpatrick. When they had hopped aboard the train in Dryden, Texas, Kilpatrick was coming off a 10-year prison sentence in Atlanta. He might have found the outside had gotten a little too tough for him. When the train pulled away from Dryden, they stormed the engine about 10 miles from the Mexican border. They had horses there waiting for him. Only one person stood in their way, a Wells Fargo messenger named David Charlesdale. He wasn't going to have any of this. When they ordered him to show them where the valuables were, he deliberately misled them. They became increasingly frustrated with him. Without even noticing, Trousdale snagged a wooden mallet off a shipment of oysters. These two should have been way more on the ball. The first chance that Trousdale got, he whacked Hobeck several times, taking him out of the picture. He then grabbed Hobeck's gun. Trousdale then started a 2-hour standoff with Kilpatrick. He only fired one shot and hit Kilpatrick just above the left eye. Trousdale was richly rewarded for his efforts. Jessie James, yes, the famous Jessie James, robbed the Rock Island train in 1873. It's known to be one of the first train robberies in the West. James and his gang of outlaws loosened a section of the track with a rope and caused the train to flip on its side when it reached the section. Jessie and his brother quickly boarded the derailed train and confronted the express manager. The manager opened the safe for the men. The men managed to escape with about only $2,000, much less than the $50,000 to $60,000 they thought they were going to get. The two proceeded to rob the passengers of the train, taking all their money and valuables. This is unusual because of the first train robbery of Jessie James and his gang of outlaws. Well, when it comes to famous Wild West outlaw, Sam Bass is up there as well. He seemed to rob just for fun. It was all a hoot to him. And it's no wonder, really. His first robbery accidentally was one of the biggest. In 1877, the Black Hills Bandits hit a Union Pacific train just outside of Ogallala, Nebraska. At first, it seemed as if they made a horrible mistake, as the train was outfitted with a safe and secure lock that absolutely could not be opened until it reached its destination. They were getting frustrated and just wanted to kick something out of, well, anger, I guess. One of the outlaws kicked an open wooden box and bam! They found $60,000 worth of gold coins. Today that would be a haul of about $1,460,000. The group split into pairs and headed off into the sunset forever. The haul was never recovered again. And now on to which is probably the craziest and possibly the coolest train robbery of all time. In what is now the San Antonio Zoo was a great train robbery. It used to breathe at Brackenridge Park. It had a 1/5 miniature-sized train that ran there since the 1950s. One Saturday in July 1970, two robbers stopped the train and began to rob the passengers of their goods, their checkbooks, their jewelry, and their money. The passengers aboard the Brackenridge Eagle first started laughing, thinking it was an Old West reenactment gag. But when one of the robbers put a gun to the passenger's head, they figured out it was not a joke. It was the first time a train robbery had happened in Texas in 47 years. The robbers were soon apprehended, and it turned out to be two Army soldiers that needed money that were stationed at Fort Sam Houston. Hey, they're actually now doing reenactments of that very train robbery using bubble guns.
Horse thieves, bulldogs, train robbers, bank robbers.
Train robberies are just a thing of the past. Ah, simpler times, right? That is strange indeed. We will keep the videos coming here on Strange History. Hey, check out this video on how rats influence history. We know it will just gnaw at you.